Welcome to USS Iowa BB-61 World War II Service History. It is shocking to me how many professionally made videos and documentaries have been made about the Iowa-class battleships that either completely miss events that happened in World War II or give out misleading information on these ships' history. It's also shocking how many people online think that the Iowa-class battleships did absolutely nothing in World War II and were basically floating hotels like people say about the Japanese battleship Yamato. This video is being made to educate people on the actual service history of USS Iowa, one of the most active Iowa-class battleships of World War II. Before we dive into this video, I want to clarify that this video focuses mostly on Iowa's participation in World War II as well as mentioning a few other ships. I'm not going to be talking much about Iowa's specifications, nor are we discussing much about Iowa after World War II. That said, let's talk about her. Iowa was launched August of 1942. I'm not going to talk much about her specifications, but Iowa was one of the biggest and more impressive battleship designs of World War II. Displacing over 57,000 tons, armed with 9 16-inch Mark 750 caliber guns, 25-inch Mark 38 guns, and many different anti-aircraft guns throughout World War II. Equipped with the all-or-nothing armor scheme, her armor was sufficient to protect her crew against most battleship guns at long to mid-ranges, but still strong enough to provide good protection against smaller guns at close ranges. To keep Iowa in control of battle ranges, Iowa was built specifically in mind to be fast. Her steam power plant could push up to 212,000 shaft horsepower with the ability to withstand more in case of emergency situations, giving her a speed of around 31 to 33 knots, or more if she was lightly loaded, making Iowa one of the fastest battleships ever built. Being built in 1942 to 1943, entering late in the war, she was also equipped with some of the best technologies of World War II, giving her ability to better fight effectively at night without searchlights and in less desirable sea and visibility conditions than some of her enemies. Iowa was finished and commissioned February 1943, where her shakedown cruise took place in Chesapeake Bay on the Atlantic coast. There she was thoroughly tested and fired her guns for the first time. After testing was completed, in August of 1943, Iowa was sent to Argentina, Newfoundland. United States intelligence got word that the Axis German battleship Tirpitz was operating in Norwegian waters, and Iowa was sent to counter the Tirpitz in case of a potential attack. The suspect threat never happened, the two battleships never met, and Iowa returned to the United States in October 1943. Surprisingly, Iowa's first threat never came from enemy fire, but from a friendly fire incident. In November 1943, a top-secret mission was assigned to Iowa and her crew, a mission so secret that not even the crew knew until the mission was underway. Iowa was to escort President Roosevelt, Secretary of State Cordell Hull, Roosevelt's Chief of Staff, and other military leaders across the Atlantic Ocean to Mers el-Kabir, Algeria. They were to meet with Winston Churchill, Stalin, and other Allied leaders at the Cairo and Tehran conferences of 1943. Before the mission went underway, Iowa was outfitted with the famous bathtub that is still on her to this day, an elevator, and other accommodations specifically for President Roosevelt. It was an 8-day voyage across the Atlantic, and on November 14, 1943, Iowa's crew was conducting anti-aircraft drills involving shooting down weather balloons they filled and released for target practice. This was for training purposes and to entertain and impress President Roosevelt, who wanted to watch the drills. An accompanying destroyer, USS William D. Porter DD-579, was also participating in shooting down balloons that got away and was also conducting torpedo drills. During these drills, a torpedo was accidentally, discharged into the water and was headed directly towards Iowa. The crew of the William D. Porter broke radio silence to warn Iowa, as the crew were new, and lamp signaling was ineffective. Iowa turned hard right in an attempt to avoid the torpedo, which luckily detonated about 1,200 yards astern in the ship's wake. Iowa then trained all her guns on the William D. Porter, concerned that the smaller ship might have been involved in an assassination attempt on the president. President Roosevelt watched the whole event, and to everyone's surprise, Roosevelt found this situation entertaining and later pardoned the crew of the destroyer. Iowa completed her presidential escort mission on December 16, 1943, and returning the president to the United States. Roosevelt addressed the Iowa crew prior to leaving by stating Iowa is a happy ship, and also touched on the progress made at the conference. Before concluding, he told the crew of the Iowa, "Good luck, and remember that I am with you in spirit, each and every one of you." Iowa departed the United States on January 2, 1944 to fight in the Pacific theater of World War II. It was around this time Iowa was painted in her infamous Measure 32 Design 1B camouflage scheme. Iowa transitions the Panama Canal on January 7, 1944, and begins preparing for her combat debut in the Marshall Islands campaign. From January 29 to February 3, she supported carrier airstrikes made by Task Force 58.3 against Kwajalein and Eniwetok atolls. Her next assignment was to support airstrikes against the major Japanese naval and logistics base at Truk, Caroline Islands. On February 16, 1944, Iowa makes her combat debut off Truk Island, conducting a patrol around the island. About 40 miles northwest of Truk Island during Operation Hailstone, Iowa was with Task Force 50.9, accompanied by 7 ships. At about 13:15, Japanese Zeke aircraft dove beneath a cloud and dropped a bomb about 100 feet off Iowa's bow. The near miss sent water and fragments over the bow and 16-inch gun turrets, causing little damage to the large battleship. The New Jersey and destroyers attempt to engage. Just as this happens, the Zeke was seen being shot down by United States carrier planes before crashing into the sea. No serious damage resulted. At 14:14, Iowa reports an unidentified burning ship bearing 270 degrees true. Bunker Hill Plane 99 contacts the New Jersey. This plane is CAG-17/A16-3. CAG-17/A16-3 explains the situation to New Jersey. There are 4 Japanese ships damaged by carrier aircraft the task force is to intercept. The Japanese ships there are Minesweeper Shonan Maru No. 15, Light Training Cruiser Katori, Destroyer Mikase, and Destroyer Nowaki. At 15:16, Iowa is now at a speed of 30 knots. She trains her guns and targets Destroyer Nowaki, range 28,800 yards. No firing orders had been received. At this time, Fleet Commander of Task Force 50.9 gives orders to Cruiser Division 6 to close and sink Cruiser Katori. Though Katori was listing slightly, dead in the water, and not firing at this time, it was concerned that this ship was within torpedo range. Torpedoes are known to be ship killers, regardless of size. At 15:24 at 800 yards, New Jersey sinks Minesweeper Shonan Maru with 5-inch gun fire. At 15:25, Minneapolis reports Katori returned fire with her twin mounts, splashes land within 1,000 yards. Iowa at 15:26, and New Orleans at 15:27 also thought Katori returned fire. CAG-17/A16-3 stated Katori never fired her guns, so these shots may have been confused with shots fired from Destroyer Mikase. However, Katori was thought to be firing, and eventually Mikase and Katori launched torpedoes at the United States ships sometime between 15:20 and 15:30 in response to being fired upon. At 15:26, Iowa attempts to stop the torpedoes with 40mm and 20mm anti-aircraft guns. Iowa eventually tries her 5-inch guns, but still no results. At this point, Katori had been under fire by United States destroyers and cruisers for about 15 minutes, with no hits or effects on target reported by Spotter Plane. Spotter Plane reports poor shooting the entire time, and the Iowa is now getting dangerously close to Katori. Commander of Battleship Division 7 then gave orders to Iowa to fire on Katori. At 15:30, Iowa, without air spotting assistance, fires her first salvo against the Japanese, range 14,250 yards on Katori. The firing lock on turret 2, center gun, did not function. But aside from that, her first 8-gun salvo was observed by spotters as a straddle. CAG-17/S-16-3 watches the gunfire and reports hits on Katori were finally achieved by Iowa on her second salvo. After Iowa's fourth salvo, the Katori starts to roll over, exposing 2 large shell holes 6 feet in diameter and 6 smaller holes. No other ship is reported to hit Katori. These smaller holes could have been the 16-inch HC delayed fuse shells. It's possible they could be from Iowa's 5-inch guns too, but the 5-inch gun fire couldn't be determined over the massive 16-inch shell splashes. At 1534, torpedoes believed to be fired by Mikes or Katori streaked between the battleships 100 to 200 yards ahead of Iowa. More torpedoes fired by Milwaukee as she was fleeing the scene, passed by Iowa's port side ahead and another close under the stern. By 1536, Iowa fires a total of 8 salvos spotting straddles on all 8 attempts at a hit. She expands 46 16-inch HC and HC delayed fuse shells and was thought by the crew to have as many as 7 to 16 hits by the 16-inch guns. The actual known number of hits from Iowa's gunfire were not 100% determined. But Katori had been under fire by destroyer and cruiser fire for about 15 minutes prior to Iowa firing. During the time the destroyers and cruisers were firing, there were no observed hits by spotter aircraft or ships firing. Iowa was responsible for finishing off and sinking the Katori, as Iowa is the only ship to have confirmed salvo hits. At 1537, Katori's bow rises out of the water after she rolled over to and sinks stern first. Iowa then was given permission to fire 5-inch guns at Mikes, range 7,000 yards. However, Mikes at this time is rolling over and is sinking rapidly. At 1539, New Jersey now tracks the fleeing undamaged destroyer Milwaukee, range 31,700 yards, requesting permission to fire main battery. Around the time of 1533, Bradford spots Milwaukee's exiting torpedo salvo headed towards the battleships. The high-speed destroyer Milwaukee is now fleeing towards the sunset. At a speed of 31 knots, New Jersey fires 7 3-gun salvos with her forward turrets at ranges between 32,000 to 35,000 yards, getting as close as 500 to 150 yards, almost hitting Milwaukee. Also at a speed of 31 knots, Iowa also fires 5 8-gun salvos between ranges of 35,000 to 39,000 yards and over the horizon. We don't know exactly how close Iowa's salvos were, but they were close enough to confuse the crew of the Iowa, thinking they hit with the first salvo, target smoking as a result. Iowa didn't actually hit Milwaukee, but it is true that Milwaukee started smoking after this salvo. Though the battleship were able to damage Milwaukee with near-miss fragments, destroyer Milwaukee got incredibly lucky and command ordered a ceasefire on the low-value target. After this short one-sided battle, Iowa is technically the largest Allied battleship to hit an enemy warship with her main armament guns, and fired the longest ranged shots a battleship has ever fired trying to engage a moving enemy ship. Milwaukee was reported to be smoking after the engagement by ships and spotter plane. If Iowa is indeed responsible for damaging Milwaukee, that would be the longest ranged damage a battleship has ever inflicted on an enemy ship in a moving surface battle. Iowa fired 86 16-inch HC and HC delayed fuse shells and 124 5-inch shells. February 21st, Iowa was underway with the fast carrier Task Force 38 when it conducted the first strikes against Saipan, Tinian, Rota, and Guam in the Mariana Islands. On March 18, 1944, Iowa was flying the flag of Vice Admiral Willis A. Lee and joined the bombardment of Mealy Atoll in the Marshall Islands. Here, Iowa participated in bombardment and a counter-battery operation. Iowa came under fire from Japanese 4.7-inch short battery guns. Iowa attempted to respond with her 16-inch guns, but the arc of fire needed was too shallow, so she continued firing with her 5-inch guns. She was struck by 2 Japanese 4.7-inch shells. One is still visible on turret 2 to this day, but suffering negligible damage to the heavily armored battleship. A combination of shells from Iowa and airstrikes silenced the enemy fire, and Iowa continued with the bombardment. She fired 180 16-inch shells and 852 5-inch shells on this day. She then joined Task Force 58 on March 30th and supported airstrikes against the Palau Islands and Wolia of the Carolines for several days. From April 22nd to the 28th, Iowa supported air raids on Hollandia, 8 and Wake Islands to support Army forces on 8 and at Tanamera and Humboldt Bays in New Guinea. She then joined the task force's second strike on Truk April 28th to the 30th. On May 1st, Iowa was tasked with bombarding Japanese facilities on Ponape in the Carolines. In the opening phases of the Mariana and Palau Islands campaign, she protected the American carriers during airstrike raids. Iowa was then detached to bombard enemy installations on Saipan and Tinian on June 13th to 14th, which resulted in the destruction of a Japanese ammunition dump. Here, Iowa fired 331 16-inch shells and 16 78 5-inch shells at the enemy during these bombardments. On June 19th, during the Battle of the Philippine Sea, Iowa was part of the battle line in Task Force 58 and helped repel 4 massive Japanese plane attacks. She claimed the destruction of 3 enemy aircraft. She then joined in the pursuit of the fleeing enemy fleet, shooting down 1 torpedo plane and assisting in splashing another. Throughout July, Iowa remained off the Marianas, supporting airstrikes on the Palaus and landings on Guam. After a month's rest in August, she steamed from Eniwetok as part of the 3rd Fleet and helped support the landings on Paliliu on September 17th. During the Formosa-Luzon strike period on October 10th to the 19th, 1944, Iowa fired in multiple anti-air engagements while screening carriers during the Formosa air battle and following strikes. At this point in the war, the Japanese were becoming more desperate. In an attempt to halt the United States campaign and recapture the Philippines, the Imperial Japanese Navy launched Shogo 1, a 3-part attack aimed at the American amphibious forces in Leyte Gulf. They want to use the surviving Japanese carriers as bait to draw United States carriers of Task Force 38 away from the Philippine beachheads, allowing the Japanese to take surface forces through the San Bernardino Strait and Surigao Strait, where they would attack the beachheads. Admiral William Bull Halsey took the bait, and Iowa, along with Task Force 38, steamed after the Japanese Northern Force off Cape Engano, Luzon. On October 25th, the Task Force 38 were almost within range of Iowa's guns. But then word had reached them that the Japanese force was attacking a group of American escort carriers off Samar. This threat to the American beachheads forced Task Force 38 to reverse course and steam to support the vulnerable escort carrier fleet. The resistance by that carrier escort group in the battle off Samar had surprised the Japanese fleet. They were unable to determine if this carrier escort group was also bait by the Americans, and the heavy American resistance further intimidated the Japanese fleet. The Japanese called off the attack and retreated. Due to all these poor leadership decisions, Iowa was unable to participate during the Battle of Leyte Gulf. During another anti-air battle in the Manila/Luzon strike area on November 25, 1944, Iowa was protecting the carriers from attacked Japanese planes and kamikaze attacks. In this battle, she shot down 2 Jill torpedo bombers, 1 Judy dive bomber, and assisted in downing more Japanese planes. Iowa stayed in the Philippines until steaming towards the west coast late in December 1944. The task force linked up with Captain Jasper T. Acuff and his fueling group on December 17th with the intention of refueling all ships in the task force and replacing lost aircraft. The sea had been growing rougher and rougher as the day went on. Then on December 18th, a small but violent typhoon overtook the task force while many of the ships were attempting to refuel. The ships of Task Force 38 now found themselves fighting for their lives when what now known as Typhoon Cobra. Many of the ships were caught near the center of the storm by extreme seas and winds. 3 destroyers capsized and sank. Many ships suffered lost or seriously damaged equipment. About 790 officers and men were lost or killed, with another 80 injured. Iowa reported no injured sailors, but did lose of one of her float planes and damage to one of her propeller shafts. Iowa was transitioned into a floating dry dock for repairs, but the damaged propeller shaft forced her to steam back to the San Francisco, United States for repairs, arriving January 15, 1945. Personally, I love the way the Iowa looked with her open bridge and camouflage scheme. She has fearless look to her with her open bridge. But at this point in time, Iowa's seakeeping capabilities were well understood. In order to keep her bridge area more dry, during the course of the overhaul, she had her bridge area enclosed and was outfitted with new search radars and fire control systems. She also was repaired and repainted in her 1945 configuration in San Francisco.
Iowa steamed for Okinawa on March 19, 1945, arriving on April 15. From April 24 to June 13, Iowa participated in multiple anti-aircraft engagements against Japanese plane and kamikaze attacks while supporting and protecting carriers who were striking around Okinawa and Kyushu. In July 14th to the 15th, Iowa was tasked to bombard the Japanese home islands Muroran, Hokkaido, destroying steel mills and other targets. Then, on the night of July 17th to the 18th, she bombarded industrial targets in the city of Hitachi on Honshu. On 29th to the 30th, Iowa bombarded Kahula and continued to support fast carrier strikes until the end of August 15th. By this point, the atomic bombs had already been dropped on the mainland Japan, and the Japanese were ready to surrender. On August 27th, Iowa and her sister ship Missouri entered Sagami Bay to oversee the surrender of Japan. 2 days later, they entered Tokyo Bay with the occupation forces. On September 2, 1945, Iowa remained in the bay as part of the occupying force. Though Missouri was chosen as the official surrender site for the signing of the surrender of Japan, Iowa was next to Missouri and was tasked to be the broadcast ship on this day, broadcasting to the world that the surrender of Japan on board USS Missouri has officially brought World War II to an end. After it was all over, as part of Operation Magic Carpet, she received liberated United States prisoners of war before departing Tokyo Bay on September 20th. Iowa then steamed home to the United States. After World War II, though Iowa came close to fighting Axis battleships Tirpitz in 1943, and possibly even the Japanese battleship Yamato in 1944, she never had a chance to engage another enemy battleship in combat. But fun fact, in 1948, Iowa did participate in target practice on the unloaded, unmanned target battleship USS Nevada BB-36. We don't know much about this exercise, but as you can see by these photos, there are some massive shell holes in Nevada's armored forward turret, plunging fire into her deck. Huge holes inside of the ship and superstructure area. A few cruisers and smaller ships participated in this target practice too, so it's not 100% determined what damage was caused by Iowa in this exercise. But it takes some serious battleship guns to penetrate battleship turret armor. So there's no doubt that Iowa was responsible for a number of hits found in these photos. And if that plunging shell hit on Nevada's deck is from Iowa, the range on the target would have likely been around 20,000 yards more or less. Iowa was among the most active Iowa-class battleships of World War II. She sank or possibly damaged 2 enemy ships, participated in 18 anti-aircraft engagements, damaging 11 enemy aircraft, assisted in downing 3, and at least 5 of them downed by herself. She participated in counter-battery operations, and conducted an estimated 6 to 7 shore bombardment operations. This may not seem like many shore bombardment operations, but in comparison to the United States' most decorated battleship, the USS North Carolina BB-55, commissioned in 1941, 2 years prior to Iowa, participated in 9 bombardment operations. She also protected fast carrier forces from Japanese planes and kamikaze attacks on at least 4 occasions, never losing a single carrier in any of the battles. Iowa was in among the most dangerous situations of her class as well. She luckily been near missed by 1 to 2 bombs. She's been fired at or hit by naval artillery fire in at least 2 battles. If you count the torpedo fired by friendly destroyer USS William D. Porter, Iowa had an estimated 4 to 5 torpedoes fired at her, luckily near missed or straddling her. She also was present during Japanese aircraft and kamikaze attacks. She also steamed through Typhoon Cobra, taking minimal damage. Iowa earned 9 battle stars in World War II and fired over 869 16-inch shells at the Japanese. The exact number of 16-inch ammunition is hard to find on the internet, but according to my calculations, it could be as many as 1,300 plus shells. And as for 5-inch ammunition, it's in the thousands as well. During her time in World War II, Iowa was lucky enough to not lose a single crew member in combat. The aircraft carrier had proved itself to be significantly more useful than battleships in World War II. So in 1949, she was decommissioned, and...
Hold up, we ain't done talking. This video was made for you to learn more about the service history of USS Iowa BB-61 during World War II. Do not confuse this video with some kind of wannabe hardcore USA flex. I'm not over here trying to convince you that Battleship Iowa is the next USS Washington, BB-56, USS Enterprise, or the next HMS Warspite. It's just shocking to me how little is understood by some history enthusiasts about the history of the Iowa-class battleships, and this video is made to educate others on their history. Okay, that said, now I can conclude the video. After World War II, Iowa was put in the reserve fleet in 1949. Little did we know her guns and speed would be needed again only years later during the Korean War. But that's a story for another time. And if you ever want to see the historic USS Iowa BB-61 and personally walk her decks, as of now, you still can. She's now a floating museum ship in the Long Beach, California, United States area. I hope you learned something new in this video. Thanks for watching. This was a lot of typing.